Okay, so back to the big book quiz then. So this was what reading lessons looked like. Um, the the big book quiz. There's a picture of it. So there's a picture of it there. This is my book. I put this together, and I'll explain later how it came about. But this is what reading lessons looked like, and I was very, very, what's the word? Strict, if you like, with staff about how these lessons will be. There was a very clear staff protocol involved. That was, that every single person who had a reading lesson on their timetable, this is the protocol you follow. So they were in form groups. They were mixed ability. So there's, if you can see the picture, I don't know if you can make it out, but it's literally a book with quizzes inside it. There is a reading list on the front page and that's sort of differentiated. It goes from quite easy reads down to quite difficult reads. There's 19 or 20 books, quizzes in the book. So they chose from the list in the front which book they wanted to read. We bought 5 copies of each book on the reading list, and they stayed in the library. They didn't take them home. So they just stayed in the library. So every time that child came to the library, they were reading that book. So they had 10 quiz questions, but it wasn't a test. That's why Accelerated Reader failed for us, because they didn't have any motivation to read on. Because they weren't, so with the big book quiz, they sit with the quiz next to them, and they were reading the question. And I would say, read the next question, hold the question in your head. You're now reading for the answer. Whereas when we were doing Accelerated Reader, they were reading for just reading, and then it was a test at the end, and they didn't like that idea. So they were reading for the answer. Then they were looking at the next question once they got written the answer in their book, and they carried on reading. So then there was just an answer booklet at the front where they just went up, and the teacher stood next to them, and they just marked their own. We gave them then reward points for scoring 8 or more, a reading reward point for scoring 8 or more. Those scores were then recorded on spreadsheet by the member of staff. We did actually have a full-time librarian at the time, so she helped out. That wasn't a big job, because of course every child doesn't finish a quiz every lesson. In fact, they only finish a quiz maybe every 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So it wasn't a big job. Scores were recorded on the spreadsheet so that I could then look over them, and I could identify who was reading and who wasn't, who was finishing a book, who was pretending to read because they were only getting 3 out of 10, 2 out of 10. They were the ones who were pretending. So we could easily gather some data on who was doing what and what they were sort of achieving. And then, like I say at the bottom there, the answer book for quick and easy marking. The questions are literally single word answers. They are just things like, what colour were Sarah's shoes when she entered the hospital? The answer is red. They write red and they move on. So, it was as simple as that, really. Meredith, would you move the slide on, please? So, some schools, now many schools have sort of taken this up and have been using it, and some of those schools are schools with no library, because I've just said, we had a full-time librarian and an amazing library with 14,000 books, and that's a massive privilege. And I know there are schools out there with no books, with no library and no books. So, but this, it doesn't matter. If you've no library, it doesn't matter. So then, because we then had the reading room, we bought a second set of the books and we put them on just on the shelves like this. So you can see in the picture there, that's 5 copies of each of the book, and above it, in those sort of plastic, the folders have got inside them the copies, the kids' copies of the book. So every child had their own copy of the book, the quiz book, but every time they finished that lesson, the teacher collected them in and just left them in the room. So they were just there, and the book stayed on the shelf. So whenever that class came in, they knew their book was there, and they just carried on reading it. So if you have got a library, it's great to do that in a library space. But if you're a school without a library, this is a set number of books. Again, unlike Accelerated Reader, which, obviously if you've got thousands and thousands of books and they're all on there, then that's brilliant. But this can be done sort of more small scale.